Hello, my name is John Guinevere. I'm the owner of GuinevereConsulting.com, and I thought I'd tell you a story that happened to me in the late 90s. Pretty interesting story. I was living up in an area in Las Vegas called the Lakes. Had a neat home I was renting. It was a big place, and across the street there was a family living there, and they invited us to come watch some movies with them and have dinner. So my girlfriend and I went over and met them, and we got to become friends with them. And they introduced us to a guy that they were business partners with. His name is Alberto DoCouto, and he's from, I believe, like Niagara area up in Canada, and they were doing some real estate development with Alberto, and at the same time my father, who was a mining engineer, was doing a deal down in Peru called the Urubamba project, which is down in Cusco on the Urubamba River in Peru. And it was a gold mine. It was a placer gold mine, and I was looking for investors, and ended up meeting Alberto through the neighbors and started talking to him about investing in the mine. And he was very interested. In fact, he got on a plane, he flew down to Peru, and he met with my father, and they sort of penned out a deal. It was a little hokey, in hindsight. It wasn't as in writing as it should have been. Anyway, so Alberto, he puts in some money, and he claims he's so rich and has all this money, and he was also fluent in Spanish. He was actually, I think, Portuguese originally. Moved from Portugal to Canada years ago. So he started putting some money in, and then all of a sudden my father came back from Peru, and my dad was, to say the very least, livid, very upset, pissed off. There's probably some other words I could use. And what had happened is Alberto went to the police and reported that my father, who was the president of the company, had mismanaged the money that he put into the mine, and then told my father. My father was actually arrested originally, and luckily he always carried this little black book in his front pocket, and every time he had a expense, he would write it down. And when he was arrested, he handed this to the cops, and they went through it. And I think my father's accounting was within 35 soles, which is, pennies, accounting for all the money that had been spent. And not to mention, he was the president of the company, and he could have spent the money however he wanted to under Peruvian law. But so they let him go, and Alberto was still down there, and told my dad to his face that he paid a judge, he bribed a judge, he says what he said. He bribed a judge so that my father could never go back to Peru again. So, to say the least, Alberto stole the mine from my dad and the other investors. So my dad, was like, can you find out anything about this guy? And the internet was fairly new, so I did some searching. I think it was Alta Vista then. I don't even know if Google existed at that time. And it certainly wasn't an expression, Google it. So anyway, there's some stuff came up with the Daily Mail and Globe, which is a Canadian newspaper. And it didn't bring the stories up, it just brought up that there were some stories. So I called them and asked them, if they could send me the story, and they said, how many of the stories do you want? And I said, how many is there? And they said, there's 56 stories on this guy that we have. So at $2 a page, they faxed all these stories over about Alberto. So Alberto was a very well-known con man in that area, and he had developed a project out in the middle of nowhere, and he built this giant mall. And as it came out over time, that everything he did out there, all the leases were actually companies that he created that signed leases to go into the mall so he could get more and more money from the banks and also from investors. So I think, I may have these numbers wrong, but it was millions and millions of dollars pension money. I think he ended up ripping off about 5,500 people, and they had to build a courthouse just for this trial. And I'm not sure what happened in the trial, but he never got convicted, or maybe did get convicted. I can't remember all the details. So anyway, he really couldn't do business in Canada anymore, so there he was in Vegas. And when I realized how bad he was, I actually ended up talking to some Canadian Mounties about Alberto. And so I put this package together, which had the articles in it and his connection to some different deals in Las Vegas. And I put this pack together, and I gave it to everyone. I gave it to, excuse me, I gave it to companies he was developing with. I gave it to the Gaming Control Board. I gave it to the FBI. I gave it to everyone. And I ended up leaving Las Vegas on a trip for about a year. And while I was on the road, Alberto came back into Vegas and started doing some other deals, and used our mine, our Urubamba gold mine down in Peru, to take a bunch of money from investors in Japan, these Japanese investors. I think they put about $36 million into the deal, and of course he ripped them off, which is a shame because it's a very viable mine, and that would have been more than enough money to get things going really well, and he would have been quite wealthy. And if he hadn't ripped us off, he would have been quite wealthy. He had one of the best mining engineers around to help develop it. So anyway, the Japanese didn't let it go, and it was a substantial amount of money, and they went to the FBI, and the FBI did an investigation, and he was indicted. And the FBI, you can look it up. It's FBI press release Alberto DoCouto. So I think that came out in the late 90s as well. So the press release was like, if you've been ripped off by this guy, let us know. And they had so many replies, the FBI ended up asked for a delay in the trial while they investigated these other accusations. And Alberto, long story short, was convicted, and I think he was sentenced to 64 months in federal prison. So he'd be out by now, and close to 80 years old. But that's the story. Well, good old Alberto DoCouto. So at least these days it's easy to investigate somebody, and I think it's worthwhile to think about doing that before you get involved with anybody in any type of partnership or business, because you just never know when someone's going to stab you in the back. And even if it's in writing, people like him just don't care. In fact, I would say what's interesting about Alberto is the man was such an amazing talker that he really could have done anything he wanted to legally and never have gone to prison, and never gotten into any trouble up in Canada or in the United States. But people like him do things like this because they enjoy it. I know that sounds so weird, but it's the thrill. It's the thrill of the con. It's the thrill of ripping you off. It's the thrill of getting you to do something that you shouldn't do for your own benefit. And you got to watch out for these people because you never see them coming. They're great talkers. They get close to you, and before you know it, you may find yourself holding the bag, like we were. And so, as a consultant, it's one of my experiences which I wish I wasn't able to share with you. But I can because it did happen and I did go through it. And if you're in a situation like that, you might want to give me a call because I might be able to help you, get a hold of it. A lot of times when we're in a situation like that, we're embarrassed and we don't even want to tell someone we got ripped off. We don't want to tell anybody the situation we're in. And not always can you get your money back, but at least you can get that person in trouble so they don't have the opportunity to do it to someone else. Anyway, that's it. You can get a hold of me on GuinivereConsulting.com, and thanks for listening to my story. Take care.